Okay, welcome back. In this video, we're going to pick up where we left off in our last one, which is creating a domain. We're also going to be creating a user in this video and creating a domain group. And we're also going to go over those in the next video, and it's going to talk about what those particular groups are and go through the different types and when would you use those. All right, so with no further delay, let's go ahead and jump into getting a new domain created. Okay, so we're on our new machine over here that we created in our last video. So as you can see, I've already renamed it as our Lab AD01 up here at the top. So from here, we're going to go ahead and select roles. And again, we get here from our server manager. So with this being open already, we're going to go ahead and select add role and features. This takes a few moments here to pop up. And so now that this is up, we're going to go ahead and click next, and we're going to do a role base. And as you can see here, if we were doing a group of servers, so if we had a number of servers that we were doing, we could actually add them right here to the pool here at the bottom by selecting virtual disk. If we had a particular disk that we were going to do that was offline, or if we had a number of servers, we can just type the names in here. So we'll go ahead and click next from here, since we already know we're on the server that we're wanting to create or promote a domain controller. So from here, we're going to select domain services. So once we select that, as you can also see over here to the side, you get a small description over here on what's actually what actually this role is that we're doing. And these are going to be the features that are required to be included with it. So you can go ahead and select add the features. So once this is done, we'll go ahead and click next. And so we don't have to select DNS here or DHCP from this menu here. The reason being is that DHCP one is that it's not a requirement. We'll do that later. But by default, DNS is installed when you install Active Directory. So as you add other like read-only domain controllers and things of that nature, you'll go through and you'll add DNS to them. Or if you're creating a DNS server only, you'll select this option. All right, so for here, we're going to go ahead and click next. And you can see here that it's already selected group policy management for us because it's a requirement for Active Directory. So we'll go ahead and click next again here. And we'll go ahead and click next here. And you can see here, of course, a restart is going to be required when this is done. And there'll be some more steps that we'll have to complete after this is done. So we'll go ahead and select install here. And this is going to take about 10 minutes. So I'll pause the video and we'll come back as soon as this is complete. Okay, now that our installation of Active Directory or the services themselves have been installed, you can see now we have more action to take. We can either select the hyperlink here, or we can click close, and we can do this afterwards. So if we were to do this after, inside of Server Manager, you can see now there's a new thing added here that says ADDS, and it's going to be Active Directory Domain Services. So you can do the promotion from here, or you can do it from here. So if you click this close button, and the server is going to restart after this is done, by the way, you can come back in here after the restart and select this option here. So we'll go ahead and select our prompt here. And again, if you missed this, because it's very, very easy to miss, you can just come back into here and select that. So from now, we're going to be adding creating a new domain. So if we were doing an existing domain, so if this was a new server and we were adding it to an existing domain, we would select this option, come down here and select the domain that we're going to be joining, provide our credentials, and we'll be off and running. So for this, we're going to be creating a new forest. So for here, we're going to go ahead and create the name of our domain. This is going to be testlab1.local. And the reason why we're using the .local, one is that we don't want this name to be routable out on the internet. And so we don't have to worry about someone having this name or worrying about records routing outside the network or So if we were naming this target.com, target.com exists out on the internet. So when we go to resolve things, our servers will try to forward the traffic out to there. So we're saying local, so we keep everything internal. There are other ways around that, but that's more of an advanced topic. So we'll go ahead and click next. All right, so here's our different options here. And when we look at the forest functional level, this is talking about whether or not we're going to have lower level operating systems in our domain. There's going to be part of the domain, like as far as other domain controllers. So if we know we have 2008 servers that we're going to be adding in here because we don't have enough licenses for 2012 or 2008 R2, then we're going to select this functional level. That way we can join these servers to the domain, which would be a 2008 R2 server. That way they can be a domain controller. This is not so much as the servers that can join the domain. This is mainly for domain controllers. So as far as our domain functional level, the highest level we can go, of course, is just 2012 because that's the actual domain that we're creating. If this was done in a 2008 environment, at a later point, we could extend the schema. We'll talk about that word later, but we could extend the schema and make it to where we can then have 2012 servers exist in a 2008 domain functional level. Okay, I know it's a mouthful, but as you go through this, you'll start to get the hang of this. All right, so from here, like I was saying before, here is DNS that's going to be installed. And by default, we're going to be adding a global catalog server because something has to hold all of our records. And that's what our global catalog server is for. That holds our printers, our usernames, our GUIDs, things of that nature. All right, our DSRM, this is our directory services restore mode password. And so this is used for if if the roles of the server have to be seized. So let's say the server crashes and it cannot be booted for whatever reason, folks cannot log in, and you have a second domain controller, which we'll be doing later, adding a second domain controller into here. These roles will actually get seized. And so what will happen is that these roles have to be transferred, but this password is mainly needed for restoring Active Directory. Okay, so we'll go ahead and create a password here. All right, so now we got our password created. We can go ahead and click next here. All right, and you can see here, we can't do any create a DNS delegate. The reason why we can't do this is because, well, there are no other domains or DNSs in this environment, so we can't delegate anything out. So we're going to go ahead and click next. And NetBIOS, this has to do within the last video, I was talking about the name of the server. So if you're naming the server more than 15 characters, this will be the opportunity to change that. And same thing is talking about here for this DNS name for the lab. So it's saying here that we can specify the name here again, which we already specified it earlier, but if the name was too long, we would correct that action here. So it's telling us here, it's taking off the suffix, and it's saying this is what your domain name is going to be. So remember, we specified the .local area earlier, and this is the NetBIOS name. All right, so this talks about where our database is going to be stored. This is our NTDS database. So we can change this if we wanted to put it off on a different spindle, things of that nature. We can keep the default here. This is our sysvol folder. We would need this if we're going to transfer it over to another server, but by default, it goes into this location, and this data is actually replicated around to the other domain controllers within the environment. This is a very, very important folder. This holds all of your group policies and things that get replicated throughout the network. So we'll click next here. All right, so after this, we'll go ahead and click next. This is just our summary of what we've selected. And we'll go ahead and click on next here. And so this will take about 5 minutes or so to complete, and we'll be right back as soon as this is done and finish up. Okay, so now that that's the prereq check is done, we see we have a couple of informational things here. These we don't have to worry too much about because this is our first domain controller in this environment here. So we can go ahead and click install, and this again will take a few moments to install. So we'll go ahead and let this complete and come right back. Right, so now our server is restarting after doing all of its installation. So as soon as this is done, it'll be right back up and we'll get signed in and show you what all the options look like once we are signed in. So you can see our spinning orb here at the bottom. It'll take a few moments here because it's got to install new policies, group policies, things of that nature. So it shouldn't take that long. Okay, now that the server has rebooted, we can see now here we're at our login screen. So from here, if we were logging in with a different user, we could click our back arrow here and go back to another user. But one thing I do want to point out, and we'll actually see this when we join a server to this domain, that if you wanted to see the name of the server, so in this case here, because this is a domain controller, we cannot sign on to it locally anymore. So if we do a /, normally this will reveal the name of the server, but in this case here, we're on a domain controller. So if we need to log on locally, this is how we would do it. We would do a / and then the username here, that's of the local box itself. So with this being a domain controller, we cannot do that. We can only use the domain administrator account or another administrator account. So in this case here, we're going to go ahead and use the administrator account. All right, and then it's going to be our password that we set up earlier. So we'll go ahead and log into here. So you can see here, we're logging in and you saw the policies and things of that nature as we were logging on there. So we'll get a blank screen here for just a moment while it's preparing our desktop. And then from here, we're going to go in and take a look and verify that Active Directory is installed. So a couple of ways we can get here. We can actually get there through the server manager that's going to come up here in a minute. We can also get here by right-clicking on Start or the charm and typing in dsa.msc. And so we can get there that way as well, which is going to be directory services. So we can get there that way also. We can get there through control panel. So you can see here now that we've typed that in, we can get there this way. And I'll go ahead and close out of here too. Well, I'll tell you what, we're actually going to go over to control panel and we're going to go to administrative tools. And as you can see here in the background, our server manager is starting up and you can probably see this, the server has gotten a little more sluggish because one is this server only has 4 gigs of RAM in it, but also two, we have now added more services that the server needs to start whenever it starts up. So normally you would go into administrative tools right here, double click it inside a control panel. Again, you can get here from tools up here at the top. So you can see here, Active Directory users and computers. You can see here we got here from the run command by typing in dsa.msc, we got there that way as well. Okay, so with no further delay, we're going to go ahead and expand this. So now you can see here that we have our domain here. We now have, we don't have any computers or anything in this default OU. This is our default container. This is going to be for our built-in objects that are part of AD. These are objects that you won't move or do anything with. These are going to be your built-in thing. So like you can see here, your administrators group. As we create users and we want to make some user a administrator, they'll get added to this group here. So from within this group here, you can see members, and here are the default members that are part of this group. These you will not remove or anything. Member of, there's not going to be any members of. And you can also add users from within here, or on the user account, when we go through to create a user, we'll add them to the groups that way. And here's all of our other groups. And you can see some of these might look familiar when you look at the local users or local groups in your computer management on the local computer. You can see some of these will be familiar, but a lot of these are going to be different because they're going to be ones for the domain. So you can see here, we have terminal server, licenses server, things of that nature, like we were talking about for remote desktop things. So we've got our domain controller here, and here's our domain controller here. This is going to be this server, as you can see there. And here's our foreign security objects, our users. And these are going to be our built-in user accounts. You can see guest here again, as I demonstrated to you earlier. We were going through looking at this. So these are going to be our built-in users. You won't really do anything with these user accounts that are here other than to add users to these things like domain admins. You won't create another group called domain admins. You would create a user and add that user to this domain admins group, and then this domain admins group would get added to other things like folders and things like that. Okay, so as we were going through and we're talking about those things, let's jump back over to here. So one of the things we did was we created a domain, which we've already done, and now we're going to create a domain user and create a domain group. So I want to go through and do that and demonstrate that for you really quick. So now back over here, we're going to go to users. So this is going to be the default container for creating a user. We're just going to right click here and we can select new and then user. We can also right click over here in the white space and do the same thing over here, new user as well. If there was another container under here, which we're going to talk about in a later video of creating different containers within here, then we'll create and talk about some of the standards. So we're going to go ahead and create a new user, and we're going to make this a lab user. There's going to be lab user 1 and no last name. And as far as the log on name, this is going to be your down level name. And so it's going to automatically fill this in for us, which is pre-Windows 2000. So we're going to go ahead and type that username in here. And again, because the first name, last name has nothing to really do with the log on name, kind of a standard, depending on the organization you work for. This might be first initial, last name. This might be full name dot last name. It might be characters, such as like 8 characters that they might type in that they pull from a spreadsheet or something auto generates them, things of that nature. So it depends on the standard that you guys have or that you get used to. And these are not case sensitive. So the only time they become case sensitive is like with firewalls or any type of remote logins, any other thing that's tapping into Active Directory, these may become case sensitive. So, so for this, you can see we typed in our username here. Going to select next. So from here, we can say user must change their password at next log on. So the next time this user logs on, they'll be required to change their password. We can also say user cannot change their password. So this would be like if we have a user and they constantly got locked out and we had some policy that said they could not change their password, we would do this here. Same thing for like password never expires. You would use this for like a service account. And then account is disabled. So if you've got users that are starting a week from now, so this was going to be test lab user 1 and they're not planning on using this account for another week, then you would go ahead and disable that account. You'd create the password and so on and so forth, and just leave the account disabled. And I'll actually show you what that'll look like really quick. All right, so we've typed in our password. We're going to select next, and we're going to select finish. And so now you can see here's a little down arrow on this user that I've created. You can see this user is actually in right here. I've got them highlighted. You can see there's a down arrow there. So now if I want to unlock the account, I'm going to right click on it, come down to enable account, or go into properties again. And so within properties here, I'll go to the account and I'll go ahead and scroll down here to account is disabled and uncheck that check mark. So now this account here has been created, and you can see here the account is enabled. So we're going to go back into properties here. I want to actually touch on some of the objects that are within here. So you can see we can add a last name to this person. We can add their telephone number, email address. This is going to be their home address here. Account details here if we needed to change any of these things like their log on names and things of that nature. Here's a profile path. When we start talking about roaming profiles, we're going to come into this area here, and we're going to update some of this information here. As far as telephone here, these are going to be objects here, again, that are going to be discoverable within another system like Exchange. So you can add things in here like home, pager, mobile number, things of that nature, organization, who this person reports to. So like if you have, once we start building the OUs here, these containers here, we'll have other users, and then you'll come in here and change who this person reports to. It's not a must that you do this, but it's good to kind of use it as best practice to be able to see what user reports to who. Some COM components are going to be things that are going to be used by other applications to tap into Active Directory. This is going to be your remote desktop profile. So when you go to Control-Alt-Delete and log on, it's going to be, again, part of roaming profiles. Remote control, whether or not this person can utilize remote control or not to log in. And then we come up here to the top, member of. So if we wanted to add this user to the domain admins, we can just type in domain. And then we can come here and we can say check name. So here are the different groups here that start with that. It's almost like a wildcard search by just saying domain, and now we can choose domain admins if we wanted to. We can select OK here. Also, if we have different locations, so if we were doing this on an actual server and not a domain controller, we would actually have to change our locations to be able to see like an entire directory or test lab, which is our domain from there. And so if we needed to search for where that user was going to be, and if we had another forest that we were connected to, then this would actually look a little different as well. And we'll get to that in later videos. So over here, we'll go ahead and cancel out of there since we know we're in the right location. We'll go ahead and say OK here. So now you can see here that this user has been added to the domain admins group. We can also double click this group here from here and go into here to actually check the members. So you can see here, administrator is there, and because we haven't selected apply yet, this person hasn't shown up in here yet. So we'll say cancel, we'll say apply, we'll go back to here, members, and now you can see here, here's our lab user, now we're there. So we'll say okay and okay out of here. So our user has been created. So that's really Active Directory for users. Now that we talk about groups, so that was going to be one of the other things that we're going to talk about here, and that's going to be creating a domain group. So when we talk about groups here, this could be a number of things. This could be for like an accounting group. It could be an OU with a accounting group within there, things of that nature. So normally you want to create a container first and then have a group associated with that within that container. So we're going to jump back over and we'll take a look at doing that. So now from within here, we'll come up here to the top. We're going to right click and we can come right here and we're going to say new organizational unit. So from here, we're going to go ahead and create a new group, and you can see this check mark here. This is new in Server 2012. Is that this protects from deletion. So if someone comes in and they right click and it's like, oh, delete, this won't allow the object to be deleted. You can remove this and delete it, but it also prevents you from having to do a restore. So you can remove this check mark and then delete that if you know for sure that that's what you're going to be doing. So we'll go ahead and say accounting. And so now you can see here we have an accounting group here. So now within this, we can come into here and we can move a user to it. So for an example, we can come back up here to our lab user. We have a number of things that we can do. We can drag this user to the accounting group, or we can right click and select move. And you can see here that we have the accounting OU here, and we're going to say okay. So you see the user's been removed from here. And now inside of accounting, this user is now part of the accounting OU. And where this will start gaining power is that we will then start applying policies to this that controls how this user is managed. And we'll get into that in a later video. So we can right click here, and one thing that you'll see here is that there aren't really any policies or anything that will go with this from here. It just tells like who can manage it, like through delegation and things of that nature. We can do things there, but you don't really set any permissions or anything from this container. Okay, well, I hope that has been great for everyone viewing here. And these are just a recap of some of the things that we went through in this video. We created a domain. We created a domain user. We also went through and created a domain group. And so in our next video, we'll pick up from there and we'll start talking about policies, and we'll also talk about redundancy within the network.